Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future is Bilingual podcast. Bienvenue tout le monde. Je m'appelle Heather.
Cześć, ja mam na imię Marcin.
So welcome back to an episode with Marcin, my co-host, and I. Today, we're going to tell you 10 tips to improve your language learning in 2022. So we're going to tell you how to improve your own language learning as a language, if you're learning language for yourself, and also if you're a bilingual, multilingual parent, how to make improvements in your family language plan and things that you do as a family. So our first tip, I put this one first because I love it so much. It is music. So listening to songs, singing along. I'm constantly singing lullabies to my kids to try and get them to fall asleep at nap and bedtime. So there's many things that you can do with music, and it's just enjoyable. We play it all the time, making food, whatever we're doing, just lifts the mood.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I do that as well. I listen to music in many languages, more languages than definitely more languages than I speak, but more languages than I've ever studied. Yep. So the tip for me is to actually listen and, get things out of it that way rather than passively have it on. But yeah, it's a wonderful pastime, or it's an active learning, but you can do it as a pastime.
Very true. So that is a good point. I think as people who are interested in different cultures, you and I, we listen to a lot of music. Probably people listening to this podcast do the same. But I think if you really want to get something out of it, you do have to look at the lyrics, maybe look up some words. Some people even enjoy translating a song that they enjoy listening to so that they know what it's saying. It's a bit easier for us as English speakers. You can often find a translation already made for you. But Try not to look at it if you're trying to do the exercise yourself. But even singing along is going to help your pronunciation. So there's many things you can do. And as a teacher, I always enjoyed creating little activities where I would take the verbs out or take vocab out and make my students listen and try and see if they could hear what verb was missing or what word was missing. So if you're really motivated, you could maybe do that for yourself.
No, that's really great. And also for those of you that have Spotify and use it, they've started including lyrics right in the songs. So I've been taking a big advantage of that.
Me too. I noticed it the first day it came out. I was like, what is this? Swipe up, see these lyrics. I have noticed some of the Arabic songs have Arabic script and some of them have Latin script. So that's interesting. I don't know about other languages, but I did see Korean. I just don't know how many languages they're actually capable of putting on there. So we'll see.
And they've only started it, just recently as we're recording. So I'm sure they'll be adding to it and improving it, because I've definitely seen Polish and German. Those are the ones I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely take advantage of that if you're not already listening to Spotify. It's just very useful not to have to look it up, open another tab, find the lyrics, etc. All right, awesome. So our second tip is to include more games. So I think as a multilingual parent, I see that my kids really benefit from playing games, and we've been kind of cooped up in the house. It's winter is coming, so we're kind of pulling out all of the games and seeing what we can do with them. So I'm thinking, board games, just because my kids are little, but if you have older kids, you could do video games. We've even done some like rhyming games, kind of just things you could do in a car ride without any material. You could just kind of, see what word rhymes with this word, and you can do that in any language. Even jokes. My mom tried to teach my kids how to do knock-knock jokes, and it's not really work. But I feel like, just anything that gets them using the language. So for them, English is not their dominant language, and they're trying to understand how to do a knock-knock joke and how it works. So it's very, very useful, I think.
Yeah, and jokes are incredible and powerful cultural tools, because like in Polish, we don't have knock-knock jokes. That makes no sense. So it obviously works the other way. If I ever try to puk puk, kto tam? So I mean, well, maybe now we will. But it's a wonderful thing, and going from, I've often tried to translate jokes into English, especially communist jokes. That's a different type of culture, but for the history students in my, when I was an undergrad and a grad student in history, I always thought that's a wonderful resource. Why don't we use more of it? So I wholly agree with that.
Because I know translating jokes can often backfire or fail, or It's just
Yeah,
hard. It's really, especially when the joke is based on a linguistic feature that like once you translate it, it's lost in translation. And
well, yeah, but I would avoid those jokes. But yeah,
okay.
I don't know how many times I've succeeded, but I've definitely failed, 100 times at least.
I just know trying to understand Polish jokes. Sometimes I do, sometimes it's over my head, and then we
Yeah,
try and explain it.
and that's what I'm saying. That's my point, is that they are like culturally so different. You can watch a TV show from another country and you'll, even if you're not, even if it's a language you don't speak, obviously, if you have the translation, you'll follow the plot line, you'll understand what's happening. But a joke, even in a language you speak on an intermediate or even early advanced level, they will most likely not make much sense to you at first. It's a whole different level of understanding.
Yeah, and things that cultures find funny are not necessarily the same things throughout, over other when you compare it to another culture. So
yeah,
very interesting. So if you are raising multilingual kids, give them jokes in all languages so that they can they can have the humor in all of their languages. And then if you're just a language learner like us, I was thinking, all the gamification of apps, that's very motivating for a lot of us to have levels and people you're competing against and points and all that stuff.
Yeah, and even if you play just video games, not language learning apps that are gamified, but just straight up video games, which I do a lot of, and these days they're all available, or many of them are available in multiple languages. So it's likely that the games you're looking for, or like the language you're learning, there'll be games in that language you can play, and if you enjoy them, it's a great way to learn.
Gaming is so different. So like when we were little, in the 90s, you just had your little Nintendo and you played against the person next to you. And gaming now is so international. Like you meet people from all over the world. It's just, I've only played video games when I was a little kid, and I don't do it now. And like when I hear people talk about gaming and how it's using all their languages, and I'm like, what? It's not the gaming I knew as a 10-year-old. So it's fun.
And I mean, Super Mario Brothers is still probably the best game ever, but there are
the vintage games are
do
good.
Exist.
Now we're vintage.
Yes.
But I do think it's cool that there is so much, intercultural stuff happening in the gaming world. Like I said, I don't know anything about it, but Marcin here is our expert.
When you lack an expert, I'm your expert.
Wonderful. All right.
Yes.
Tip number 3. You're also the expert in this.
Am I? Well, this is now we finished. The first 2 we lure you in with some fun things like music and games, and now we're down to reading, because that's our next topic. So, for bilingual parents,
I love reading. Why?
Yeah, sure, but maybe if people make a list of things that they like, music and games might end up slightly higher.
A little bit higher.
They're obviously wrong, but it's still. So yeah, reading is a great activity, and you can do it with your kids in obviously your own language, but in your target language. And this is something we could go on for a very long time about, the advantages of reading with your child, because it's not just that they're developing language and they're developing breadth of interests. They become interested in many things. They learn vocabulary, but it's also a very intimate time between a caregiver and the child, where you really bond and become really close, and you build relationships that way.
Yeah, it's the whole experience. And we don't have to tell you guys this. If you're a parent, if you're not a parent, you still know. So we're kind of preaching to the choir here. I know everybody knows how important reading is. I did see a study that talked about how much more vocab you can get from reading than television or anything else. The level of vocab is so much higher. So I think they were counting the number of advanced words or something. Just pointing, it was the number of advanced words in children's books compared to TV for kids, TV for adults, everything else. Like children's books had the highest percentage of advanced words. So that's very interesting, because, we're going to talk about TV, but there's just there's countless reasons why reading is important. I think you can read to your kids in any language. There's, everybody has their own philosophy, but I personally read to them in all the languages that I speak, depending on the book we have. And I also translate. So sometimes I'll ask them, like tonight, my daughter gave me a book and I said, do you want it in French? and it was a book written in English. And she said, sure.
Yeah.
So I read it in French,
Sure.
and sometimes I translate, Polish to English or, whatever. If I translate a book into Polish, I usually simplify. But that's
Yeah.
just
Well, you
whatever.
got to read the crowd.
Yeah. Well, and also my skill level, but
You're good
but
with
that,
that.
you got to know yourself. But I
Yes.
also think there's so many other, it's not just books, there's poetry. You included audiobooks here.
Mhm.
There's other ways to get that linguistic input and that
Yeah,
all that
and there
forms
are
of literature.
there are some incredible children's poetry books
Oh, yeah.
that are being published every year. There are incredible new books that are published, and I really encourage people to look into them because we all know like some of the classics, and we all grew up with them and enjoyed them. So it's easy for us to now, as adults, get those books for our kids. But the books that are being published, and poetry books included, are absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
So definitely check out your library and your bookstores for that
Mhm.
section, because you'll find some incredible gems in there.
And a great way, obviously, you can talk to the librarian, but also I just follow a lot of accounts on Instagram, and there's many people dedicated to posting about,
Mhm.
children's books specifically, books about inclusion specifically, books
Yeah.
about, indigenous populations specifically. There's many, many accounts. If you know what you want to look for, you can look for and find accounts that are just about, Hispanic authors, but they publish in both English and Spanish. Whatever it is that you're looking for, you can probably find it. Same thing.
Yeah.
I follow a lot of accounts that are like Polish moms, but they're teaching their kids English. So kind of the opposite of me. There's just a wealth of knowledge on social
Mhm.
media. So don't be afraid to use it. All right. How about for our learners, if you don't have kids?
Yeah, I will still read, and definitely still read children's books, especially if you're, a beginner, an early reader. They are still, you'll still get a lot of them. You'll get a lot of vocabulary and a lot of grammar. So it's very, they're just very good resources. And, you have to balance it, because if you get things that are too easy, things that
Yeah.
you understand very easily, or even things that you don't necessarily understand, but if the level is just for, say, babies, and it's extremely simple, then you might get bored or frustrated. So yeah, definitely don't overdo it. But
Yeah.
those, especially picture books. Picture books are not made for kids to read by themselves. They're made for adults to read with children. So they are designed to operate on all reading levels and age levels.
Yeah. And have someone expanding, not just saying,
oh yeah,
book, dog, cat.
Yes.
But yeah, I think picking the right level is very important. And just on the note of kids' books, I've done a couple Duolingo events in Polish where I'm reading, I'm actually having the participants read out loud a page of a book, and we go through a child's book or children's book in Polish. And it's surprising, like people are saying like, oh, I didn't think I would get this much vocabulary or this much grammar, because we talk about the grammar of the sentence. And it's surprising even to me. Sometimes I'm reading books to my kids in French or in Polish, and there's a few words I don't know. And before I do the events, I might have to look up a few words to make sure I can accurately translate to my, the participants of these Duolingo events that I'm, when I'm with my kids, I just read it, but I'm like, what exactly is that word in English? Like, I don't know if I could just come up with it off the top of my head.
Yeah, wing it.
So like we said, also, children's books are rich in vocabulary. So, don't be discouraged if you don't know it all.
And once you get to a more advanced level, if you're looking at learning, like the nonfiction books for children are absolutely amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And they include all subjects and all topics. And obviously, the dinosaurs and trucks are perennial favorites with children, but almost any topic you can think of, including like coronavirus and climate change and very current topics, and biographies of people, interesting people. Like there are incredible children's resources for that. So definitely check those out, and they will be written in a language that is slightly maybe easier to follow, and the books might be shorter, so you don't need to pick up a 1,000 page biography of somebody. You can get a 50-page biography that's written for kids that will contain as much information as you'd like to hear anyway.
Good point. And you can always go to that 1,000-page one later, but like in increments. You want to read the little one first and then move on to the middle one. And I also just want to mention, because as everyone probably knows, this year I've been learning Italian, and I did read, you probably know these series with Ollie Richards. He has like the short stories in series where he has all the, a lot of the big languages. So I read the Italian short stories for beginners, and he also has an intermediate one. And, after a few months of Italian, well, thanks to lots of French and Spanish knowledge, I was able to read that. And I just think those are really good because the stories start easier and they get harder. And he specifically chose like the most common words. I forget whatever number of commonly used words, but he specifically like wrote the stories to include all those words so that it's giving you vocab you might actually use one day. So those are a really great series. And I also was reading, if you can find one of these, it's harder, but a bilingual book. So Jhumpa Lahiri has, in other words, and she has the English version, has both the Italian and the English. So she wrote it in Italian, had somebody else translate it. So if you can find a book like that, it's wonderful because I would read the Italian and just check the English if I didn't get a sentence or an idea.
And once again, more and more children's books are being published bilingually. So that's something that, depending on what your language is, if it's like French or Italian or Spanish, and you live in the US, like the chances are that your local library system might have a fair amount of books to choose from that are bilingual.
True.
And we should still give a shout out to, all the non-book reading materials, your Instagram posts and newspapers and a lot of websites online might be catered towards language learners. So if you can read news in your target language that is designed for people who are learning the language, and those are really good to keep up to date with events, and especially events in your in the country of your target language. So those are great resources.
I agree. I feel like any reading counts, even if it's just a short sentence or a full book. It's reading is reading, and the more you do it in that language, the better you're going to get.
Yeah, and as we always say in the kids' room, like audiobooks count as well. It counts for reading. Awesome.
That's a good point. All right, another fun topic is writing. Nobody wants to hear this word, but
I don't want to hear it, and I'm the one who wrote it.
I know, but it does help. It will definitely help you, and it'll help your child as well, depending on your child's age. Of course, my kids are not at that age yet, but once they get old enough, and they have the skills and they know letters or whatever the writing system uses, you can start small. You can have them help you write the grocery list, maybe write a wish list for their birthday or for the holidays. Write a postcard. It doesn't have to be a super long thing, but if it's something motivating, let's write a letter to your grandma, just something short. And also, I just want to give a quick shout out to Multilingual Dad, who's on Instagram, Yoshito. He was a previous guest, so you might have heard his interview. And he wrote a book recently about getting your kids to read and write in their target language. And his Instagram is full of great ideas. So definitely check out his Instagram, check out his book. He's got tons of resources because that's really what he's, specializing in, is getting your kids to actually use it. And reading and writing is such a great way to do that. So.
Yeah, and we've looked, or I was reading some research about the by now it feels like an age-old question of typing versus writing by hand, and but there's from a neurological point of view, like the writing out by hand and kind of engages so many different parts of your brain and uses so many different like synapses in your brain that especially when you're learning an alphabet or you're learning to speak a language that uses a different alphabet, actually doing the strokes of the pen will help you solidify being able to recognize those characters. So starting from those building blocks, and then as you progress, writing just words, and then start to write sentences, and then progress to something more advanced, like you can keep a personal journal if you'd like, but even as you said, like just write out a shopping list, and that's already taking advantage of that.
And I think with our kids, we want them to feel comfortable with the language, and if they aren't able to write in it or read in it, to go back to reading. I think that's they might feel that they might not feel confident if they don't grow up having those skills. So I think we're not saying you need to do these tips every day, but if you can kind of bolster their reading and writing. It just might help them in the long run. And I definitely think writing, a personal journal, I started that with French when I was in high school, and I found it super helpful. I mean, I made tons of mistakes. Our teacher had suggested that we do that. But I think it's also just getting used to thinking in that language and getting the flow of the language. And it, she said she wasn't going to correct us. It was just to get us writing. And I continued. I mean, I started in high school, but I continued college, living in France. Like all my personal journals, I always wrote in French.
Oh, yeah.
So if anyone finds my personal journals, hopefully you don't speak French, but
yeah, here's another reason to learn French.
There you go. But also I was going to say, for people who are learning a language, sometimes, the book, if you're using a book or you're following somebody, they want you to write a certain sentence, but I really found it useful to just think about, like, what would I actually want to say? So like the first thing I wrote, I think, was, hello, my name is buongiorno, mi chiamo Heather, like all the like basics about myself, because that was what I was actually going to use when I was going to these Duolingo events. People would ask you, like, dove abiti, where do you live? And so I just literally wrote like a self-introduction, like, here's me. And I would refer back to that when I was first attending events, because I would like forget how to say like town or, whatever. But I think it's just, the more you write from your own personal experience, I feel like it's going to be better than just copying somebody else's words or translating per se. I feel like it's just going to help you learn better because you personally want to say those things. You're looking up words because you want to say them. You want to use them.
Yeah. And so just to kind of reiterate what you just said, you can start right at A1. You don't have to wait until you're an advanced speaker of a language to start writing.
Definitely not.
Right from the first day, that is beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not going to be anything spectacular.
Yeah.
So if anyone follows me on Instagram, a lot of people have been reposting Multilingual Marissa's meme, which is of, God, what is that actor's name? He's sitting it's a man sitting in a group of toddlers, and it's like me learning a new language at an A1 level. Yeah. So that's how I feel. But it's normal, and everybody's commenting, yes, I feel it. Yeah. That's me with this language. But yeah, it's normal. You're not going to be able to say anything spectacular, but if you can at least get those sentences down, it's going to boost your confidence. So a lot of this is like little wins. We want to have these small wins to add up to a bigger success in 2022. Yeah.
Let's move on to something more fun after we did all the 2 tips that are a little more difficult. I had to get my teacher,
boxes checked off, like make sure you do reading and writing.
Yeah, well, yeah, we both had a lot of ideas about those. Yeah. But yeah, so let's move on to tip number 5, which is cooking and eating.
Yay. So cooking and eating, everybody, we need to do it. Unfortunately, a lot of us who the burden falls on. It's an unfortunate matter, especially when you have kids demanding snacks 20 times a day. But food is a major part of all of our lives, whether we like it or not. We have to eat. And it's also really cultural. So you can make it really fun. If you're learning another language, try making a dish from their culture. If it's your home language, a heritage language you're passing on, it's all the more fun to introduce that food to your kids. And, if you can make it with them, that's even more fun, or send them to grandma's, have them make pierogi.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But even just like looking at recipes, there's so many things you can do with food. You can write the grocery list. You can ask your kids, what do we not have? Go look in the fridge. What are we missing? What do we need? There's just so many things that you can do with food, and that vocab, it's very specific. I think a lot of us that either have a heritage language or passing on a heritage language, the kids are really good at food because that's like one of the main stakes in a heritage language, right? We're not lacking in vocab in the kitchen, I don't think. So
no, but also because we all enjoy a good meal, but we don't necessarily enjoy all the prep work. This gives you another dimension, because I found that following recipes in a target language to be more fun than using recipes in your L1 and in a language that you speak very well, because you use it a lot anyway, so there's not much difference. But yeah, if you're following, especially doing a dish that is more culturally significant, so in my case, because I love soup and I learn German, looking up asparagus soup is always fun in the spring.
Wow, that sounds like a big highlight.
I know it doesn't sound like much, but for me it is.
I also was going to say that there's a lot of specific vocabulary that goes with food. So like stir, sift. I don't know. I don't even know in English, but like I know that
Dice
there's
and chop.
dice. That's another good one.
Yeah.
So that, and different words, spatula, there's lots of things that aren't used anywhere else except the kitchen. So it's really great to expand your vocabulary. There's lots of verbs, like you said, when you're looking up a recipe. But I think a lot of us, not me, but a lot of us enjoy meal planning, cooking, that whole side of it, going to the grocery store. Kids love going to the grocery store. I never take mine, but they enjoy it the one time they've gone. And so it could be fun, take them and talk about what you see and all that fun stuff. And of course, we can't, miss the pièce de résistance, which is actually sitting down and eating a meal.
Yeah.
The most important part of cooking and food and all that.
Yeah, hopefully you'll have enough time left after all that prep work and walking
Yeah.
through the grocery store, speaking with your kids about every item on every shelf.
Every food, you need to know all these foods.
Yeah.
Yes, you finally get a meal at the end of this, hopefully, where everybody sits peacefully and uses their napkin and fork and knife properly. No,
we are hoping for that holiday magic.
Every year, but
yeah.
All right. And if I guess same things apply. If you're learning a language, look up some dishes, try and make some dishes. It's good for me with Italian. Italian food's the best.
Arguably after German, right?
I mean, asparagus soup or pizza and pasta.
No, it's either, it's pasta or bratwurst. So you're either getting sausages. I mean, it's wonderful for vegetarians, like German cuisine.
Is it? Or are you being sarcastic?
Slightly, but they do have kind of like Polish people think, it's meat heavy, but it's also once you sift through that, there is a lot of wonderful vegetarian
You've got
dishes.
miseria, got your side dishes.
Yeah.
I just love the word miseria. It sounds like misery, but it's my favorite.
It's exactly what it is.
No, it's not.
Because it is apparent. Well, so unless you're telling me that the story is apocryphal,
okay,
because Queen Bona came from Italy.
Wait, we have to say what miseria is. Cucumber sliced thin with.
I'm getting there.
Oh, okay. I thought. Okay.
So back in the 16th century, the Queen Bona married King Zygmunt of Poland, and she was Italian, and she came to Poland and Italy. Really nice weather. She came to Poland. She was miserable. She hated it. I might be exaggerating for effect, but then she brought cucumbers with her. That was one of the foods she brought over, introduced to Poland, along with tomatoes and some other vegetables. And whenever they made cucumbers, she cried because they reminded her of her native Italy, which she loved so much and missed. So the side dish is, as you said, cucumbers with, was it mayonnaise or sour cream? Whatever. Yeah, sour cream and salt. And that's all it is, but it's called miseria in Polish, which means misery, because she was saddened whenever she had them.
I never knew that was why it was called miseria. I thought it was just like a random coincidence.
No, I wrote a story about that once a long time ago. Yeah, for the Polish Center.
I feel for her. I do feel for her. That's rough.
Yeah, Italy is. I mean, I spent grand total of like 2 weeks of my life in Italy, and
it's 2 weeks more than me
every day.
Yeah.
It was more like 10 days probably. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, think about it every day. Yeah.
Yeah. One day I'll get there. Buongiorno.
Yes.
That's what
and
I
then
tell.
Eat a lot of pasta. Yes.
If anyone wants to sponsor this podcast and send us on a trip to Italy, buy us a coffee.
Yeah.
For $2,000 each.
You do that, we'll start a YouTube channel.
Please don't promise anything. I don't have time for YouTube. Too much pressure.
I'll do it for a trip to Italy. Sounds like.
Okay. I mean, that's a really hard deal to pass up. I think I would too.
There you go.
It won't be a good YouTube channel. It won't have 10,000 followers, but.
No, it'll have 20 on day one.
You, me, and all our friends. All right.
20,000 friends of ours.
Close friends. All right. So the sixth tip that we want to tell you guys about before we get too off track about Italy is having a routine. All right. So parents, we know how important routine is if you have small kids, but I think just, if you're not speaking, let's say you're not speaking your home language, your target language with your kids right now, and you want to start, just pick one time of day. It doesn't have to be the whole day. You don't need to, have this 24-hour goal that you're going to be perfect on day one. Just pick one point in your day. It could be breakfast time, before you get the kids out of the house. It could be bath time, dinner time, whatever is a good time right before bed. Maybe you're like, oh, I forgot to do it all day. Let me quick talk to them in target language before bed. Whatever time it is, pick one time and try and stick to that. And then you can grow from there. So if you're successfully speaking to your kids every day at bedtime in the language, pick another time and try and add that on. So basically this whole podcast episode is like, do little goals, like take little goals, try and be successful before you have this huge, we set ourselves up, I think, for failure with our New Year's resolutions, where we're like, I am going to go to the gym every day. And then by day 3, we missed our gym time. So I think, just trying our best to do a little bit, to change your routine a little bit, because it takes a lot of time to get used to something new. And, you're not going to be able to change day to night just because the calendar has gone to January 1st, unfortunately.
And also, this is a very big undertaking, obviously. So it can be very intimidating. So it might be easy to say, like, yes, I would like to, but I don't really have time. Whereas, we never do that about eating. Like, we still eat, even if it's rushed and whatnot. But so if you can think about the parts of your day where you can build that into your routine. So for me, I spend about 30 minutes each day, like driving to and from work. So I spend an hour in my car at least. And obviously, if you're lucky/unlucky enough to use public transit, you don't have to just be limited to listening. You could be doing your language apps or reading a book in your target language or whatnot. So that's a great.
I like that tip where find a good time in your day where it would make sense.
Yeah. And if, you can do it during ironing. If you iron, and there is
who's ironing and making asparagus soup with Marcin? Please let me know. It's not me.
Yeah, no, it's just me. Nobody else has time. But yeah, if you iron, you're not really using your brain, to
washing dishes. You can listen to a podcast. Although this is different, we're kind of getting into. There's different ways that we're talking about routine. What are you trying to add to your routine? Is it more input? Is it more speaking? Is it more? Yeah. So this one's really open. You kind of got to decide, what is it you're doing? Do you want to, read your kids a book in the target language every night? Whatever it is that, pick one thing you want to add to your routine and try it out. Try it out for a few days. Try it out for a week, something like that.
Yeah.
We all struggle with routine. It sounds so good, right? Like, I am going to do this thing.
Yeah.
But life happens, and that's okay. Just, if something happens that day, just move on.
You can reset.
Okay. Exactly. All right. So another fun thing you could do, this one is also very broad. Tip 7 is to engage in activities. So this is very broad, but if you're lucky enough to have a community where they maybe have a bilingual story hour or any other activity where there's going to be speakers of that language. So I'm thinking, like, in the US, there's a lot of Spanish speakers. So you might be able to find events where you can actually bring your child and have them kind of live an experience in that language. Ideally, your kid is going to be in person with peers of a similar age, but that's not always feasible. That's not always available. But if it's online, if it's whatever it is that some kind of an activity, I know we're gonna probably try and do a video call with the other Polish kids from back home and try. My kids got their Christmas cards. Well, we got Christmas cards from them. And the kids were saying how much they miss seeing their friends. Yeah. So we're like, okay, we can, we can't really go see them, but we can maybe do a video call. So hopefully we can have them speaking Polish together in that way. So having, some sort of activity where they're going to be engaging with people.
Yeah. And the power of peers is, we shouldn't underestimate it, because as an adult, you can teach your kid and, speak to your kid, and they might, learn it, and they might think of it as something that old people speak. But once they get peers that are their same age and they engage with them, then once again, it becomes a much different reality for them.
Yep. It's a good point. Peers are such a good asset if you can find other kids that speak the language. And if you are a language learner, also try and find an activity. If there's maybe like a meetup that happens. I know my friend Reka, on Instagram goes to these polyglot gatherings like every weekend, and I'm so jealous. She'll post pictures and I'm like, I wish we had that. And she goes,
Where
why
is
don't you
that?
start it? That is she's in the Czech Republic.
Okay.
But she's like, why don't you start one? And I was like, I think my husband will kill me if I take on any more pleasure projects like podcasts.
Right.
And
Well, you know,
the
the Czech Republic is interesting. One Duolingo event that I mean, these days I work so much that I always work when there are Duolingo events, but one of the ones I used to attend was organized by, well, this person from New York, but also this person who lives in, I believe, Switzerland, from what I remember, but he is Czech and his partner is also Czech. So they both live in, I want to say Bern, from what I remember. But they speak German, so they co-organize the event. So yeah, shout out to the Czechs.
Shout out to the Czech Republic. Yep.
Yeah.
And Duolingo events are great because, you know, if we can't leave our house, we can at least meet up with people who are learning our same language. So I went to one last night with Italian. It was very fun. So yeah, just, you know, try it, check it out. It's free. So that's an advantage. And you don't have to really go anywhere. Just sign on to Zoom. So
yes, you need a device with an internet access.
And I also want to say, you know, tutoring can be, you know, some people enjoy it, some people don't. But I know our previous guest Tetsu talked about how he has his kids on italki. Basically, they're playing games with their tutor, so that's an activity. And he said his kids fight over it. They love it so much because, you know, whatever it is that this tutor is doing, is they're doing a good job with kids. So because he's the only Mandarin, he's passing on Mandarin, and he has, I think, his father, but like, you know, he's got 4 other languages he's balancing. So he adds on a tutor to make it fun. So that's an activity you could add on. So there's lots of things you could think about. You know, it might cost money, might be free, but just, you got to explore and be creative, or create it yourself. If you can't find it, maybe create it, start up a Facebook group, see if there's other parents interested. You'd be surprised if you have time.
Well, got to make time.
Yes.
So this very naturally leads into the next tip that we have, which is talk about broad talking and video calls. And this is, you know, as we say, kind of obvious. This is what we do. But if you really want your kids to pick up that target language, they need to speak it and use it. And that way, you know, that once again becomes real for them. And the bigger the circle, the group you can create of people they see, you know, so it's not just you or your partner. So you know, it's a larger group of friends and family and the community. The larger that circle is, the less they'll get bored looking at you.
So I think this is, like you said, this is obvious, but it doesn't mean we always do it. I think so many of us, you know, multilingual people, polyglots, bilingual people, we can study our language and we do everything, you know, we're doing all the right things, we're studying, doing Duolingo, but we're not actually saying anything. You can do a lot of studying and never actually pronounce words if you're not like consciously saying like, okay, I need to actually say these words. Like I can't just click the buttons and read a book. There's so many things that I think we default to, and we don't want to sound crazy and talk to ourselves. And we listen to podcasts, but we don't talk back to the podcast because we know they're not listening to us. So as obvious as this sounds, like you kind of do have to force yourself out of your comfort, you know, your comfort zone, out of your little bubble, and make yourself talk. Now, I don't think you should force your kid to talk, but I do think this is different from activities, because you could send your kid to an activity, and we've all seen kids at the playground, you know, 10 kids who speak 10 different languages, and they can play because they're not actually talking. They're just playing and communicating with facial gestures. So, you know, your kid might be in an activity, but not actually speaking. You know, they're going to be hearing things possibly, but they're not necessarily speaking. So I think speaking is an important thing we should focus on as parents. I think the bilingual parenting community knows all too well that many kids are what we call receptive bilinguals, where they understand the language, but they don't actually speak it. And we've all met people who say that, you know, oh, I grew up with this language, but I don't speak it. Oh, I can understand this language. I understand everything they say, but I can't speak it. So this is a very common phenomenon. Why? Because we don't push ourselves, because it's easy. It's very easy to kind of what do I want to say? Like slip under the bar, where you can just be like, I'm learning a language, but I'm not using it. I'm living in this, bilingual environment, but I don't need to use the language. I can respond to my parents in English. Sounds super general and broad, but talking is important. I think talking is very important.
Yeah.
As a talkative person.
I'd phrase it as it's hard to be talking. And especially if you're somebody who is introverted, who is not who's not very outgoing, talking can be one of the scariest things you'll ever do in your life.
I can't understand that. I'm so extroverted. I can't even wrap my head around that concept.
I know. You people just don't get it.
We don't get it. Like you can tell me that, but I don't get it.
Yeah. If you'd be quiet for a minute and let the introverts take their time to say what they want, the world be a better place.
Okay, point taken.
All right. Okay. That's enough of that. It is very important. And if you can meet native speakers, as a language learners, if you can meet native speakers, or if there are native speakers in your area, and you can, if you are lucky enough to, to know them or befriend them or see them on a regular basis, or, if you're able to go to like a local store owned by somebody who speaks your target language, you can, even if it's just hello and goodbye and thank you, and you're already making progress if you weren't doing that beforehand.
Good point. And you might make that person's day to be so surprised, like, oh, this person's learning my language.
Yes.
And I do, there's many ways, like you said. So if you have friends, family, great, reach out to them. But you can also make friends. There's apps now where you can, sign up and try and get language partners. And there are people that are willing to have phone calls or even video calls. I know introverts might not want to do that. But it is different than writing and texting. It's another level, because you have to understand the person. You have to respond back. I think that's what language is. It's communication. And it's just a different mode. You're in a different mode when you're writing and reading versus when you're speaking and listening. So it can be scary and uncomfortable.
Yeah, I met someone who, I might have mentioned her before on the podcast, but she came over to the library and I helped her with something, and it turned out she's a German native and German teacher, and so we spoke in German for a bit, and she was absolutely incredible and very understanding, and she ended up giving me her phone number and said, like, just call me anytime you'd like to practice. Well, guess how many times I've called? It's too scary. Yeah.
0.
No.
Oh,
yes.
Marcin, you
that's
should
the right
call her.
amount. Yeah.
Okay, I'm setting you a goal for 2020. You need to call her at least once.
I'm not doing that. She's very nice and a great teacher, and I helped her with her grandchildren's communication or whatever. But yeah, it's scary. Not calling a stranger.
Oh, see, I know. It is a bit weird and scary.
I can call, but only sometimes.
Well, you gotta befriend the person and then you call. You don't call them the first time you say hey on the app.
No. Well,
hey, you want to call?
After they offer that.
I know.
So yeah, I'm putting myself out there being like, see, it's all right.
It's okay to be scared. I know.
Yeah, there are other ways that you can engage in speaking, and that's why Duolingo events are also great, because they are a much lower stress level in a way.
You can totally exit.
And there are more people.
You're not the only one. It's not one-on-one. The one-on-one, it's a little scary. I just want to mention, because we are talking about video calling. I don't know if we said call your families if you have, for bilingual parents, make phone calls to people back home. But just because we're talking about video, and I'm learning Italian, all the hand gestures that I can learn through a video that I can't learn through a text. So there is a benefit to having a video call for certain things.
Has somebody ever done a study where they took native Italian speakers, tied their hands, and had them communicate?
Oh, I don't know, but that's very interesting. It would be so frustrating, I think.
I mean, it would be frustrating whatever language you speak. Yeah. I mean, we do have that view of Italian and Italians as the stereotypical view, but most people in most languages do gesticulate a lot when we speak. It's very natural.
Mm-hmm. Good point. All right, let's get on to, or almost to the end, number 9, which is TV and films. So I said we would come back to this. And for parents, if you have children that you want to, engage them more in the target language, of course, TV is such an obvious, kids love it. If you can find, age appropriate films or TV shows, it's good for natural speech. It's great for vocab. My kids have learned vocab through TV shows, and I'm like, I don't watch with them normally. It's my husband, and then I'm like, what?
Mhm.
Because
Yes.
they're saying Polish words that I would never know because they're very specific.
Yeah.
So I've learned some vocab through it as well. But yeah, I think it's just kind of an obvious, like, it's a fun activity, and just being an uptight parent, I'm going to give everybody permission, because I am the non-TV parent. Like, I just don't want to put it on. Like, I'm the one who
Mhm.
was like anti-TV for a long time. So I'm going to let myself go of this guilt. We are entering a very cold winter here in Canada, and we are using more TV, and it's okay. It's all okay. So I'm giving you all permission to let go of the parenting guilt about TV being evil, because I was kind of on that team for a while.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of a thing with all new technologies. Radio came out. Like, how dare people do that? And TV came out, and the previous generation who grew up with radio and loves radio said like, oh, TV is evil. And then the next generation, the internet came out, and that generation watches TV all the time, and they talk about the evils of the internet. So
to each their vice.
But also
well, I think it's more the studies pre-2-year-olds, it's not suggested, and then the WHO actually said pre-5 it's not suggested. So there's different studies, there's different reasons why people are anti, but I think it's not something we need to avoid 100%. I don't live my life in a black and white. I think moderation is good for everything.
Well, that's the idea. Yeah,
exactly. So if TV is a motivating factor for your kids, then I would say go for it.
Yeah. And for kids and for language learners, like hearing that dialogue on the shows is very powerful. And once again, I want to give a shout out to libraries, because our local, we're lucky enough, like where I live, I'm lucky enough to have a relatively well-funded library. So if you live in a place that doesn't fund their libraries, then we should vote for different people maybe. But it's things like Netflix or Disney Plus. They can be very expensive, and that becomes an accessibility issue. And I mean, having an internet is already an accessibility issue. So having Zoom calls and Duolingo events, that can be very hard.
Yes.
But like our local library, lends out, we have over 30 hotspots that you can borrow. So if you don't have internet at home, you can still get it. As long as you still need a device, you need a phone or a tablet that can access that Wi-Fi. But yeah, so I realized that one of the apps that the library offers, I didn't realize they have audiobooks again. They used to have audiobooks, then they stopped, and now they have them again. It's an app called Hoopla, and Canopy is another one that the library has. And and depending on your local library, you might have had it the whole time.
Actually, Hoopla is also regular books. You can also read like an ebook.
You can read regular books, like ebooks, audiobooks, music, film.
Yeah, Hoopla's great.
Just checking.
Hoop with two O's.
Hoopla's, yes, Hoopla. I was checking out their languages, and I looked for Polish movies, and there are like, a couple dozen of Polish films that just came up right away. Some newer ones and some really good ones, and same with German when I check that. And Canopy is kind of like the Netflix for libraries. They have a ton of movies. It's a movie streaming service. So definitely check your local libraries for that, because you can get things on YouTube. If you have, once again, you can check for that, and they have a lot of things. But
YouTube has a ton
but it's a very treacherous place. You can sometimes go very quickly from like a kid-friendly show to something that looks kid-friendly, but it was actually made to be completely the opposite. And
yes, you need to be. We need to be aware as parents, grandparents.
Yeah, yeah. Sure. But if you have things like Hoopla, and you can do it for Hoopla Kids, and same with Canopy. Great shows
and on
there.
that point, I would say, this is my own philosophy, but I think as parents with bilingual kids, I think someone should be sitting with them, watching the show with them, interacting, talking about it after. I know the TV gets a bad rep as being a babysitter, and maybe for a few minutes you go away, you do something else, but like somebody, usually in our case it's my husband, but it's nice to have like an adult actually sitting with them, especially if it's YouTube, because like we said, quickly YouTube will end and immediately start another video that you haven't chosen, that YouTube has somehow chosen. So it's definitely not the safest thing to just walk away and leave your kids watching. So yes, I always suggest, at least someone checking in on them.
Yeah.
Asking them like what happened, what do you think is going to happen. You can kind of do the same things we would do with a book, with a TV show, where like you're, maybe if you, before you start it, you talk about pre-lecture, the pre-watching, like what's going to happen in this episode based on the picture that's in the title, the first picture. And then, at the end of it, like, oh, well, or in the middle, because usually things resolve by the end, but maybe in the middle, pause it and say, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think they're going to do? How are they going to solve this problem? So you can kind of, your kids might get annoyed with you. This is all like idealistic.
Yeah. Well, got to read the crowd once again. Yeah. And I get in trouble with my niece and nephew because I'm like almost didactic, and I don't like myself for that either. But yeah, when I'm there, like, because there is a book, it's called the Whole Book Approach, I think it's called. It's by Megan Dowd Lambert, who's actually local, and I've met her, but actually I know her husband better. But it's a fairly like well received book about reading when you're reading picture books with children or books with children, to have that whole book approach where you're looking at not just like the story and what happened, but you're looking at the illustrations, and you're looking at how the book is bound, and why did the publisher decide to make it the size they did, and if it's like a square versus like a rectangular book, how would it differ if it's the other thing. So I kind of sometimes try to take that similar approach and apply it to films and movies, like you said, like looking at that movie
kids are not the
poster,
best audience, like you said, though. For that, I'm also very critical.
And it depends how you phrase it.
Yeah. Well, like today I was reading Pucho with my Duolingo Polish group, and I was just laughing with them because I was like, it's so nice to read like my kids' books with you guys, because I can like dissect the grammar with you guys. Like my kids wouldn't listen to me talk about genitive and instrumental, and also like how the text, like I'm like critical that the text is too small here, and like, or the book is, I was saying how the book is heavy. Like my only complaint is like I'm trying to read it to my kid in bed and it's too big and heavy. So I have that whole book approach where I'm critiquing the book the whole time I'm reading it.
Well, it's your own fault for talking about genitives with your kids.
No, I don't. That's insane. You got to read the audience.
Yeah. So if you do, you had it coming.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last one, the number 10. So we did a lot of practical things so far. I hope that's what people will get. But the last one is goals. And it's about setting your goals and think about what is realistic. Just like with your L1 acquisition, with your native language, your child, like if they're 7 years old, they're not going to be, as we said, they're not going to be talking about accusative and genitive, and they're not going to be parsing grammar, but they won't be doing that in their target language either. So it's about thinking what is realistic and being probably be very conservative about that. Because we've mentioned that many times before. It's
take your idea and cut it in half and then try that.
Yeah. It's a similar approach to travel, buy a suitcase that's half of what you think you'll need.
Sure.
And so really approach it like that, with having a very strict idea of what is feasible, so that you do not fall so short that you get discouraged.
Very good point. Start small. I think starting small and then celebrating if you have a win, you do it for a week, then celebrate that. Try again the next week. It doesn't have to be these massive goals from January to December. This is what I'm going to do every single day, because you are just setting yourself up for failure. I think we've all been down that road. And as a parent, I would say just don't stress about your kid's level. I think it'll come with time, and you could make a video at the beginning of the year, maybe make one every month and kind of see how it's progressing. But I wouldn't stress about their level. I wouldn't stress about their vocab, their grammar. It's normal to be making mistakes, to maybe be forgetting words. So, maybe have like one, maybe two goals, but like make them as a family, not like, child A, do this. Like I wouldn't be very strict and very focused too much on like one kid getting better, like, oh well, this kid has worse grammar, I want them to improve the grammar. Like I wouldn't do that approach. I would just say, as a family, we're going to speak Polish every night during dinner, something that the goal you could actually achieve, maybe make it kind of broad so that it's not like you said, this too small thing that you're gonna, if you don't do it, you fail.
Yeah. And similarly with your like an adult language learner, if you're Heather, sure, but most of us don't start by parsing grammar in Moliere if you're learning French.
I love grammar. You'll
yeah.
never change my mind.
No, I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm just saying some of us like it slightly less.
Okay.
But yeah, start with board books and picture books. And then once you progress through that, maybe get a biography of Moliere before continuing. But that's something that you can do. And just as, like if you're watching TV shows, like I think Netflix has Money Heist, which is like at the moment the #1 show. And you might find that super riveting. So, and you love that show or other shows that you like. So don't set that as your goal for like how much you want to enjoy reading a board book in your target language, because that's
well, also do what you enjoy. We've given you 10 tips, but you don't need to do all of them. You can pick that you're only gonna do TV and cooking. Those are your goals. That's great. You don't need to. I think these are just 10 tips that people can choose from, but they're not like this is not like a recipe you have to follow from 1 to 10. This is pick and choose as you want.
Yeah, and TV and cooking sounds very appealing.
Yeah, sounds great. So the 10 tips that we suggest that you should do in 2022, at least some of them, are: number 1, music.
And number 2, games.
Number 3 was reading.
And number 4 is writing.
Number 5, cooking and eating.
And 6 is routine.
Number 7, activities.
And 8 is talking and video calls.
Number 9 was TV and films.
And number 10, goals and setting them. And celebrate each small victory because they do build. And those are much more easier to maintain. And that consistency is the most important key to success. So if you think to yourself, like, I will attend 1 Duolingo event a week, that's huge. Like, even if it's just that, that's already spending usually an hour, depending on how long the event is, but about an hour. Really immersed in your target language.
And I think accountability is also an important part here. So if you are on things like social media, a lot of people post their goals for the year. Could be something you want to do. I've seen a lot of people doing quarterly goals. So they have goals for just the first 3 months and then the second 3 months, so they're chopping the year into quarters. But I do think that is motivating, because once you've put it out there, once you've told people, here's what I want to achieve, it can help you to keep yourself accountable. There's many ways to do that. There's trackers, there's all sorts of things that people can get into. So we're not experts. We're not going to talk about that right now. But just things to think about, food for thought while you're planning your New Year's resolutions.
So as a bonus one, always listen to the Future is Bilingual podcast.
There you go. Don't miss an episode. So thank you everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and you let us know if you have any specific language goals for 2022. And if you enjoyed this episode, please tag us if you share it on social media. And thank you for listening. Bonne année.
Thank you. Szczęśliwego nowego roku.
Feliz año nuevo.
And Frohes, neues Jahr.
And Happy New Year to everyone. We'll catch you with a new episode in 2022. Okay, bloopers. What are we really doing? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future is Bilingual podcast. My name is Heather.
Cześć, ja jestem Marcin.
Oh, just going to surprise me with Polish? Okay. Możemy mówić po polsku, ale no, we won't speak Polish. We won't speak. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future is Bilingual podcast. Bienvenue tout le monde. Je m'appelle Heather.
Cześć, ja mam na imię Marcin.
Cześć, Marcin. I can't do it. Welcome back,
good. It's
guys.
Not live.
Can you imagine? Hello, everyone. And Marcin, I can hear you typing.
I'm trying to make it easier for you. And
so, bonne année.
I dobranoc.
No, bonne année is...
Oh, yeah, bonne année. I realized it, and then I just was silent.